Now we are focusing more on centers of production. So we have a small panel here with 5 participants, and Joanne's coming back, but we have Judith Leicester. Is she here? Is Judith here? Yes. She's gathering her things together and coming from the cultural anthropologist from the University of Graz. Andrea Reddy, who was here earlier. Andrea, where are you? You are also the spokeswoman of the council, the cultural matters. And Michael Sammer, yes, coming here, and sociologist and expert. And Kees is coming here from the festival in Terschelling and one of our In Situ members. The theme is creation centers, international networks and collaborations. And I suppose implicitly we're trying to focus a bit on, to be a bit more specific than the previous discussions. We doesn't quite say what kind of creation centers, but we've had 2 good examples. Joanna with her dance, contemporary dance as a creation center. Then we also had the center in Marseille. This morning explained that it was also a center for the creation of art in public space. And also there are also circus creation centers. So there are in France is a whole system of creation centers. And as I understand the word creation centers, it's more than just a company. They have responsibility to produce, but also to research, also to educate, also to link in with the local community. But the way they are run is that they are often run, or they always run mainly by artists, and have a great deal of freedom of how to translate that, how to, in the local situation, actually work. So I guess we're talking about the same kind of center here, but perhaps in a different field, or perhaps cross arts or interdisciplinary. It's quite open. But perhaps then we start with Kees. Could you perhaps lead? Because it'd be nice to have, following on from Joanna, what you see that you say in the contemporary arts field, what would be, is there a need for new typologies or new kind of centers, and what could you imagine would work? Or what would you think would be relevant now, given that we have so many theaters, so many cultural centers, so many dance centers? I mean, another layer, what would the purpose be?
Thank you for being the first. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I wanted to respond in this way as well, because, but I have to explain a little bit where I come from.
Yeah.
Because I'm artistic director of the Ural Festival, which is located on an island, rural island in the north of Holland. In fact, it has 4,000 inhabitants, and it's the most unlikely place for an arts festival, for the arts, contemporary arts festival. But in fact, there's no theater, there's no cities. Still, I feel there's a lot of resemblance to the discussion here today and to the place here, because, and then I explain a little bit. This festival already exists for more than 30 years, and in fact it has developed this long time for being. It developed from a festival which showed art. So, and the audience was like consuming and having a good time. But in the development of the festival, and also of the audience, and also of the artists, but also of the inhabitants of the island, there was like a new mix of relations. And in fact, you could say the festival turned over to be like a very intense working place, like a creation center in itself. And in fact, a lot of the items we are dealing with, we were speaking about today about negotiating the role of art negotiating what art can do. In fact, our festival became like a big laboratory, a playground, to try out lots and lots of things. On one hand, on landscape development, on another level, on how you live together. So for us, there's 50,000 people coming each year on this island of 4,000 inhabitants. There's hundreds of performances, but the main thing is everybody is there to meet, to discuss, to see art, to discuss the art, and also the artists start to work with, in a way, like Joan spoke, with audience to really discuss matters of democracy. So it's like a temporary society, a field of experimentation, and that's what I think is the link with here, and might be a new model for the use of the place of art and development.
Well, that's fine. So we're talking about quite an open and proactive structure or platform in somehow. Maybe Judith, you would take on. Would you like to carry on from that?
Okay. Yes, it works. So I'm a cultural anthropologist, and as a cultural anthropologist, I'm here not only as a participant of this panel, but I'm also here as a kind of participant observer. That means my research work at the moment is about art and urban development, or art and urban space production. And yes, I'm very interested in the different actors and the different actor groups which are involved in these processes. A lot of people today, I see Heidrun here, also Michael Zingernel, talked about these different groups of actors. They talked about their collaborations. They talked about the different interests these actor groups have. They also talked about it, what these actors, where they come from, what not only interests they have, but also what habitus they have. That also means what kind of capital they possess, and capital not only in the sense of economic capital, but also in the sense of social capital and cultural capital. So that means here we're investors, here we are talking with architects, also the and what I wanted to say is that it's interesting that more and more artists act also like ethnographers. So I asked myself when I heard them speak, and also when you talked about your projects, what is the role of an anthropologist in our times? Because the artists are ethnographers, or maybe they're better ethnographers than we are. But what I missed a bit, and I think this is also a very important thing for the question we have to discuss here at this panel, what I missed were a focus on the power relations between these different actor groups. Because when I talk about investors who have millions of euros, when I talk about creation centers which get €2 per, or about cultural production which gets €2 from millions of, I think it was a few hundred million euros and 80,000 euros which the artists get. So we really we cannot say, oh, there are networks and we collaborate and everything is nice, but we also have really to talk about how the relations between these different actors are, the power relations, really focused on power relations. And when we talk about networks and collaboration, the second point I want to make is that the question is always not only who is already included in these international networks, but also who is excluded of these networks, and who is included in these collaborations and who is excluded of these collaborations. So my points I want to make, maybe briefly, is the question of habitus, of the people who are included, of the power relations between these people, and of those who are excluded out of these international networks and collaborations.
Yeah, yes, would you like? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah.
Oh, yes, interesting questions, many open questions. I also have no answer. My only question is, what can we do as a group or a panel or a community to reach the goals we have heard several times today? So the power structures and all this, how can we force the city, the politics, also the investors, to just start doing what everyone here on the panel said should be done? So we have to talk with each other, we have to include all different kind of stakeholders and so on and so on. But I hear all these messages for years now, yeah? And nothing ever happened. And this day and this symposium is not a symposium which the city started. It was the symposium with Werner and In Situ and started. It's okay, it's perfect, wonderful. But from the city or from the investors, there was a one workshop day from the new owner. It was one day last year, I think, or 1.5 years ago. Until now, no results ever been published. So it's an intransparent, it's an not open, it's a closed development process so far. And I admit that architects, planners, and also the investors are willing to be more open, but they don't know how. And we also don't know how exactly, because if we knew, we had done it. So my question, to repeat it, is what can we do to start this today, tomorrow, and not meet again in 1 year, in 2 years and say, oh yes, we should do something, and I'm really optimistic that we can do something, and that we find somewhere in our pockets €2.50 to engage people. It's ridiculous, so to speak. So I want action, and not only talking about we should probably act a little bit more and together and this shit.
Yeah, Judith, that puts you on the spot, doesn't it? Perhaps in a way, but now the format of a creation center has been expanded a little, so we are actually taking in all the population and all the groups. But it seems we're always drifting back to that. But it is interesting what you both said, is that perhaps one is not talking about a creation center in pure artistic terms, because of course a creation center can also be something broader. It can also engage civil society in questions which are not purely artistic production. It could be about many other matters which are relevant in an urban development or this sort of typology. So that could be actually interesting. A new creation center, you could call it, but you could also call it a new democratic forum, or you could call it other things. But that could be interesting, to find something which is open enough to cover the aspects you're talking about, but perhaps controlled as a cultural center is. In a way, curated as a cultural center might be, driven as an artistic project with a strong social, democratic, whatever responsibility and opening, but not a political tool and not a financial instrument. That could be interesting to find that, because there would be autonomy but openness. That might, I don't know, I'm just throwing it up as a possibility. But what are you going to do about all this? Because you must have had subjects, firstly about, do you think there's a need in the city for another kind of cultural structure, which is between, because festivals are often faced this about how do they become part of the everyday and not just the extraordinary? How do they extend their influence because they have a huge platform? How do they do that? They need to transform to something else. This is one force. And the other, a place like this, needs not only lots of input, it also needs focus, putting together, structuring. So do you see anything that could be fit together there?
Yeah, so I come from the production part, so I want to speak about these conditions you need as a producer. So I'm working as an architect, but in an interdisciplinary field since 14 years. And I want to tell you about Gottsbanen in Aarhus. So it is a sort of creation center. And it is really interesting, inspiring space. So we had the chance to develop their project and install it in the frame of Media Architecture Biennale in 2014, November. And so it is a space which has exhibition spaces, it has workshops, it has a lounge where you can have breakfast and where you have lunch, and you have rooms for artists. And so whenever you come there, you find people you can speaking with, you can discussing with, you can exchange your experiences. And it's a really, really interesting atmosphere. So we've found there a really good space to bring our projects to a certain maturity, because we had there 1 week rehearsals with performer and architects and composer and programmer. And it was really inspiring. And what was inspiring? There were people from all over the world coming there. They had, of course, artists, they had people from companies, they had people from the academic world. And those people, and they also have interns coming from Sydney, New York, working there for free, just to be there, just to see this context. So that was really great also for us. But there is a big but. I also discussed a lot with artists there. They are not in this network, and now I come to this what you said, you did before. It's about this, who are in and who is out, you know? So who is included and excluded. So this whole structure, of course, swallows a lot of money. And if you're not managed to get in the network, then you have problems to find their money to make your projects. And I think this we have to be careful about, to have a well-balanced structure and, of course, an openness. Because I think such creation center, what it can help, it can bring projects and problems to a certain maturity, to a certain, to keep it complex during development. If you work in the disciplinary, you have the possibility to let the complexity high. So not to be too specific, yeah? And I think this is the advantage of such a context, to have this open innovation, open spaces, and finally also open heart, you know. So I think, yeah, definitely Graz maybe needs such a creation center. But of course, we have also to be careful that there is also enough space for the people who might be not included or who want to work in another environment.
Yeah, clear. Joanna, did you ever feel that your center was closed or limited, or how did you try and, I mean, contemporary dance is not something that more than maybe 10% of the population normally would see if you're lucky. How do you make something like that democratic and open? Because this project is one of the best efforts I've ever seen. You don't include everybody physically, but mentally, symbolically, you include everybody. So it is possible to be completely open while having to be also very strict, because there is only 365 days in a year, and there's only one sunset going up, one sunset going down. So you can't just say that's undemocratic. You just say, well, that's the rule of the game, so we do that. So how do you play that game of being, you might say, not elitist, but having artistic vision and being open and having a national center? How do you manage that?
I'm not there anymore.
Right. Well, then you can tell us how it really went.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm not sure how that works in the sense of running these kind of projects that I was running in these very elitist institutions, which today, not in terms of public, in terms of the funding bodies, are completely reinforcing bigger performances on stage with 20 dancers. And you're like, but where do we play a piece today with 20 dancers? How do I pay those 20 dancers? How do I bring the economy to the choreographic center? And in that sense, this project is very interesting because the people are convinced. The funding bodies were convinced as well. But in some ways, perhaps there was a friction point where they weren't able to embrace these very important elitist structures working in public space, which for them in France, I think, has a real problem of identity and is not yet installed as a real art form. The proof, for example, this piece, The Vigil, in the beginning, as an artist, of course, I went to the SACD, the Royal Society of Dramatic Authors, and I lodged The Vigil and said, okay, I'm the author of this work, like all of my choreographic work. And they said, but no, how can we possibly take on this work? It's not a piece. I said, yes, but it is a piece. And they said, but there is no public. And I said, yes, it is a public. It's a town. And they said, but there is no time. I said, yes, it starts at 5:21 on July the 21st. And then it's, so, and we went on like this. They said, there's no design. I said, there is a design. There are designers. They said, there is no rehearsal. So we went through this whole list of things that for them qualified what would enable them to take on and represent this work with the body of all of my works as an author. And I knew what they were saying to me. What they were saying to me was, if we accept this work, Joanne, we're going to get other people, other artists trying to get their works represented by the Royal Society. And we don't want performers to be part of this. But I think also for me, the public have changed. And this for me really is the key. Because I think that today we are not living in a society where the public want to be told what to do. I think here when I'm performing for a public or when we're talking, you're all internet users and maybe 2/3 of you are gamers. So playing games has a certain mentality. Maybe you're joining social media, and so maybe you're really curating yourself today and you're choosing which news articles you're going to publish on your wall so that you also are a curator and a publisher like I am. And this for me is the key. It's really the people and the public who we can bring with us to get to a point where perhaps the funding bodies cannot refuse any longer to hear what is being said.
Andrea, would you like to come back on some of the things that have been commented on and perhaps also develop this idea about how you could see that whatever center structure it is, it could try to engage openly, well knowing that it's impossible to have everybody, but how could you see that work, or how do you imagine that?
Maybe I just would like to add something to her comment. Is that okay? Okay, because there is another term which is stressed a lot was stressed a lot during this day, and this is the term public. And I don't think that there is something like the public which we can include, but public is always a thing or a process which is a kind of where different, again, groups of actors with different interests act with each other. And the question is always how in this process of making a kind of public space or something like that, or whatever it might be, the question is always who are the role models, the leading figures, also when it's connected to the question of art production. And when we are in such a space, so that's really maybe it's just a question, not a statement. When we're in a space where I know, okay, this is a space which is made by an investor, and so on and so on. So and we know that there is in contemporary times there is a very strong capitalist and economic logic in general, which also drives artistic production. We always have to think about, is this the kind of public we want to have? So, or is it more a kind of critical statements which artists and so on make to produce this public, to make this process of public going on? And how are we influenced in our productions and in our statements when we act in such a context of a creation center or something like that, when we know about this, or does that make, or doesn't it matter?
Well,
so it's also a question for you, who is a kind of priest of this creative class and creative industries.
Well, I think the city has a definite role to play here, of course, because I think the city must make sure that they have on the one hand, the interests of the artists at stake, and ensure there is artistic freedom, and ensure that they do things not because they're either told to or have to. There is an artistic choice to be made. You may choose the directors or whatever, as you may do, but that must be a decision. And then you have to make sure that, of course, it is accessible to the largest possible number of people on many different levels, not just to come, but also to be consulted, also to be involved and be educated, whatever. So I think that's it. But those models are, of course, possible to achieve within, I would say, within a privately driven area here. I think definitely you could do that, but you have to protect and you have to support and you have to lead. I mean, you have to formulate. I don't see at that level a conflict of interest. I do see a conflict of interest if you will say, well, it's up to the owners, it's up to the investors whether they want a cultural center, whether they want to invest in arts. And yes, it might go wrong, and it probably will do. But I think that is in your power to create a balanced situation, make sure that the good of the city and the citizens, and I think it's very good that you flag up that you don't talk about publics or audiences, but you talk about citizens. And I think it's very important that arts institutions or artists or creators talk about citizens, because it's not just about securing as large an audience from citizens, but it's actually using the experience with arts to empower them and change them as citizens to become more critical and aware and informed about their reality. So I think that two-way thing is very, very important. But you can also, you might say, write that into the brief. I mean, as far as I can see, you're in a strong position to define the frameworks and define and set the bar. This will mean that you'll have to interfere with a privately run system, but you must do that as early as possible, as far as I can see.
I do not think that we are in a strong position. I do not, because the others are stronger so far. The city, the politics. One detail, yeah? There is a person called the Reininghaus coordinator, yeah? We haven't, since 2 or 3 years,
is he here?
This person.
He's here, isn't he?
He never was at anything, at any event concerning Reininghaus. He just sits in the Rathaus, in the town hall, yeah? And if you go to the mayor, yeah, and say, hey, we're strong, we have good ideas, he says, well, tell the Reininghaus coordinator, because he's the person who coordinates all this stuff. But he's a phantom, yeah? He's waiting for his retirement as a Reininghaus coordinator. That's also a joke, but it's a joke that is, in Graz, it's reality, yeah? So I don't think we are strong. We are strong, yes, but we are not strong enough so far to make all these ideas we have and all these aspects, and we are so smart and we are so, yeah. But my question, I have no answer so far. What should we do tomorrow to tell them that we are that strong? You suggested we are.
I just think you stay here then.
What?
You have a vigil. You make a vigil from here.
Yeah, and send it to the Reininghaus coordinator.
I think you
and
have one person here all the time to protect the interests of the citizens and the artists, or on the top there, and you make it a symbolic process.
I can also imagine that you force the attention to this place by art, by
I think you do
by infecting this
we
area.
did this in the years before, but it was not enough. The area is too big, so we need more power. There were artistic, also La Strada, several times, and we had this. We had also this international symposiums during the years. And I cannot get any information about the development of this city, of this area. There is almost no website for this. The city has a website, but it's not the website.
There's no information.
No, there's no information. There's almost no information from the owners in there. There is nothing. There's something like a black hole here in the green area.
Andrea, can you not commission these people to actually come up with a?
We try. Yeah. We are on our mission to do this, but that's a quest and a task and everything. What you can imagine. We are not at our goal. Director Werle is optimistic. Maybe I should also be optimistic again, but it's not easy.
So the good news, the artists are strong enough. So I think no, because the artists are working and producing, and also there are a lot of contexts like Forum, like Werner, also with Organisation, and so there are some hubs. They are doing already such small creation centers. So, but now it's the question if we should install in Reininghaus. So I think this is also a huge question in this room. And I think if we are carefully and really, it's a sort of programming.
Come on, we are careful enough over the years.
How it can be organized, and who is in, and how you can come in, and that it's open enough, then I think it would be worth to try it.
I think we were too careful, maybe, We were not strong enough because we were too careful, and okay, let's wait, and they try, and it's just a little...
but it's true, it needs a critical mass. You need to have a critical mass.
Yeah.
And you do it, you can't just keep on nudging. At one time you have to take the step, and you might say force the issue. Of course you have to do that. You have to do it tactically at the right time with the media and so on, without doing it too much that the owners or whatever, the investors, they completely back off. But I think you have, and that's a sort of psychological thing and a media thing. And that's why I think is perhaps the weakness of the process until now, as far as I see it, very superficial, very much on the outside, is that it's been rather uncoordinated, it's been rather ad hoc, and it leads to people doing things in frustration or because they can. And that way the energy just dissipates, it just disappears, and it lessens. I think you have to go into try and generate another spiral, an upward spiral. You have to generate things which you go from strength to strength and have a definite starting point. And this is as good as time as any, to have a definite starting point. And if you haven't achieved something within this year, I think the case would be lost, because all the major decisions, as we heard from the architect and others, are being made now. And so time is short, and some things work better in compressed time. Some things are actually, because you have to make what you call a positive decision-making environment. In creating a positive decision-making environment, and then things can work, if you understand that. But so I think actually you've got quite a positive situation, and I don't know if he's completely off the table or off the record. When I spoke to the owner of this part for an hour or so, or 2 hours actually, the first day, and I think he understands intuitively what the potential might be, but I think he's completely out of his depth as regard how to not misuse that, how to not get so involved, how to be not pushed around, how to be not misled or mistrusted or whatever. I think he's completely nervous about, there's no safety net for him. And I don't know how, I think he's paralyzed. but I think he has an understanding. I think he has a will. And I also think he has the economy, which is robust enough to be able to manage something. So I think in a way you have to take the lead. I think in a way you have to take the initiative and say, are you coming this way?
Could there be a possible way to suggest something like you mentioned before, this mobile think tank, yeah, or this container, or this just to install a location here? That's, for me, this is a creation center also. It's a creation center about the qualities and all the things we would like to have here, because we are thinking about in which city we will live in. And so,
I think that'd be fantastic.
If we can suggest this, I'm still not positive if this will happen. If we suggest this one thing, just install it, just give us a little financing for 1 year or 2 years, to install this platform. Maybe a first step, but maybe not. I don't know.
I think it could be a good idea. I mean, it would be,
Well, in a way, I think to be very practical at the same time, it's I think use the force of temporary actions, and that's why I come back to the link with the festival. A festival can provoke things, can give good examples, and now can I have some slides, because just to be a little bit optimistic about it's. You can compare the processes. In Holland, Holland is for a big part below water level, so there's huge amounts of public money spent to protect the country. But it's more and more difficult for the national government to decide on their own. So now, in a way, to make the bridge, we are offering our festival, our place on the island, with for a debate ground on how to reconstruct the dikes, because it's a big issue. People want to be protected, but there's, from nature side on, there's an urge for more open dikes, for more natural ways of keeping the water outside. But in fact, it's a big public debate. So now, before starting this debate, we have some playground in which artists come with ideas and show them. And suddenly, there's very interesting conversations of people who would normally not meet, but now they're there on the island, they speak with each other, and next year they come back. So establish this conversation. I think that's what you're looking for here, is use the most creative ways of establish this conversation, and not on a free base. There should be commitment. That's, so these were some images for this project. But
good.
Come
on
to our
on
festival.
that positive note, Case, we will end the session. Thank you very much, and we have a short coffee. Okay, thank you.